Justin recently requested me on Patreon to review the first two Mighty Ducks movies, and now I've reached the conclusion to the trilogy titled D3 The Mighty Ducks. I admit to not thinking much of the previous films, finding the first one a too familiar underdog sports movie and the second basically repeating a lot of the same beats. With the third film being about the Ducks entering high school, I thought it might provide something a little different. However, what I found was a movie that derailed a lot of the characters, and the result was a largely underwhelming final film. The characters were not exactly the most fleshed out individuals before, but the turn taken with them here removed the few endearing elements that were there. A lot of their screen time is spent on them participating in prank wars with the school's senior hockey team, and they exhibit a lot more jerkish behavior, especially team captain Charlie. I understand the point of Charlie's arc is we're not supposed to agree with many of the choices he makes, but I thought the filmmakers went a little too overboard with his anger towards everything. The senior team they have a rivalry with is also strange, as they keep going on about how the Ducks don't belong there because of the school scholarship they were given. Many of you are graduating next year. Why do you care so much? You also have their new coach, Ted O'Ryan, who's portrayed as extremely tough and constantly yelling and making cruel remarks to the Ducks. However, at a certain point in the story, he suddenly changes on a dime, with the Ducks also immediately liking him. It just was not believable to me, and seemed to contradict a message from the first two movies. Part of Bombay's character was that he was too harsh on the Ducks, and they got better when he mellowed out of it. D3 presents Orion's harsh attitude towards the Ducks as a good thing, and that his actions make them into better players. Speaking of Bombay, the production only had Emilio Estevez available for about a week, and so he sporadically pops in from time to time, either to offer advice or get the Ducks out of a bind they find themselves in during the third act. The main reason for Estevez's lack of screen time was that he was directing his movie The War at Home at the same time, and the filmmakers had to work around that. Bombay's arc felt kind of done in the second film, so to be honest, I'm not sure what else they could have done with the character here. It also makes sense for the Ducks to learn how to manage the athletic skills without Bombay there. Meanwhile, Hans shows up a few times, and then for some reason he's given an off-screen death. This just felt like a cheap way to add more motion to the film, and seemed mostly cruel and unnecessary to me. When reviewing the second movie, I criticized the humor for being more broad compared to the first movie, but I would like to apologize to D2 for saying that, because D3 is the sequel that really pushed the comedy to overly broad levels. There's an over-reliance on slapstick scenes, including a wacky rollerblading sequence early on, and they even feel the need to throw in a lot of cartoon sound effects. They feel so out of place, and I did not find any of those gags all that funny. Also, was the Texan player a huge fan favorite from the last movie, because his screen time is increased in this one. Additionally, he's dumbed down a lot here, as we get jokes related to him not understanding simple phrases. The few lines that did work for me usually came from Kenan Thompson, which is a credit to what a good comedic performer he is, even at that young age. And something that was retained from the first two movies was how well directed the hockey game scenes are. Well, minus the cartoon sound effects I mentioned before. The first big game the Ducks play does have a solid theme on the effect of being overconfident can have on an athlete, or anyone really. They start off the game scoring goal after goal, but then the Ducks, thinking they're invincible, catches up to them, and the other team scores enough points, resulting in a tie game. We also see how their cockiness negatively affects their abilities on the ice. These are interesting themes the movie could have done a better job exploring if it did not spend so much time on prank wars and wacky comedy sequences. After watching D3, I can now understand why it tends to be the least talked about entry in the Mighty Ducks franchise. Although in the original script, the Ducks were going to face off against Iceland again, losing and then training their way back to the top. So in an alternate universe, the third movie would have just slightly tweaked the second one, which already slightly tweaked the first. So I will give credit to D3 for attempting something a little different from its predecessors. I just found the execution to be lacking. Even though I've not been all that enthusiastic about the Mighty Ducks movies, I understand why they left an impact on those who did see them in the 90s, as it gave the young audience a group of preteens who managed to beat the odds and show they were more athletic than people anticipated. Now let me know in the comments what you think of D3, the Mighty Ducks, or even the trilogy as a whole, and thank you for the request, Justin.